Hey TCA family, it's Delegate Mark Edelson here. I just wanted to thank you all so much for being with us tonight. I'm so sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person. Life has been a little bit hectic lately, but I wanted to send you this video just to remind us all of why this work is so important. Right now, the COP30 summit is happening in Brazil. That is the international conference of countries focused on reversing the effects of climate change. And the United States did not even send a federal delegation to this conference. Our federal government has basically taken the approach of don't look up to climate change. If we don't look up in the sky, then we won't see the asteroid directly coming at us, and there's nothing that we can try to do to change its trajectory. What gives me strength and hope in these moments is that there are state and local governments who are sending delegations to the summit. And what they are saying is what we are saying. When the federal government isn't standing up and doing what it's supposed to do, that's when it's time for our state and local officials and stakeholders and advocates and community leaders like yourselves to come together and get the work done. And that's why the TCA is so important. Remember, what it will do is it will mandate that MDOT, the Department of Transportation, will have to conduct a real, proper assessment of the greenhouse gas emissions involved in any new major highway expansion projects. And for any projects that will have a greenhouse gas increase, the project will need to be halted, slowed down and modified, or a sister project will need to be built that will net out those greenhouse gas emissions. This will do a number of things for us. First, it'll hopefully slow down the projects that are only going to expand our highways and not actually help people get to work, get to school, save lives, get out of congestion, get around where they need to go safely and healthily. And what it's going to do is prioritize the projects that will help us improve our transportation sector, improve access to opportunities, save lives, and improve the environment. And that's why it's so important. And one other thing I just want to say, something else that we're seeing happening around the world is that other countries that are leaning into improving climate change are having extensive benefits of the green economy. There are jobs to be had. There is economic development opportunities to be had by leaning into the green economy. And that's what we have to be doing in the state of Maryland. And the TCA is the epicenter of that work. And that's why it's so important that we get to Annapolis and get it over the finish line. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Let's get it done.
All right, so thank you so much to Delegate Edelson for sending in his video. He has, like I said, been just absolutely the most incredible champion for the TCA from the very beginning of this campaign. So we are now going to turn it over to our wonderful panel that is joining us tonight. I'm going to give a brief introduction of our speakers before we get started. So joining us tonight, we have Maggie Ostall, who is the Director of Conservation Policy at the National Aquarium, where she leads the aquarium's engagement in support of the organization's priorities to stop plastic pollution, save wildlife and habitats, and combat climate change. We're also joined by Quentin Batts, the Baltimore project manager at Rails to Trails Conservancy. Quentin has worked closely with the Baltimore Department of Transportation to create Baltimore City's Art in the Right-of-Way toolkit under the Made You Look initiative. We are joined by Dr. Terry Fitzgerald with the Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. Terry Fitzgerald is a physician trained in internal medicine, emergency medicine, and addiction medicine. He has been involved with Physicians for Social Responsibility for 40 years and is on the steering committee of Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. We are also joined by Dr. William Reed, who is the chair of Frederick County Progressives. Dr. William Reed is a retired veterinary staff scientist from the National Institutes of Health and is now the chair of Frederick County Progressives. He serves on the boards of Frederick Community College, the Asian American Center of Frederick, the Rural Maryland Council, and Progressive Maryland. So thank you to our panelists for joining us tonight. I am going to kick us off with a question for Dr. Terry Fitzgerald. So Terry, what are the health impacts of highway expansion, and what are the benefits of investing in transit, walking, and biking?
I want to thank those who organized this rally and the coalition that's been leading this work for several years. Special thanks go to Senator Hedelman and to Delegate Adelson for their work and their leadership in this undertaking, and thank all of you for being here. I am asked about the health impacts of highway expansion. Any discussion of health and highways is a discussion about the health impacts of fossil fuels. While there have been significant improvements in air quality over several decades, air pollution remains a leading health risk in the United States. Studies estimate that fossil fuel pollution is responsible for 350,000 premature deaths each year in the US alone, and that's a lot. Beyond deaths, fossil fuel pollution is making us sick. Lung diseases, heart disease, cancer, adverse reproductive outcomes, neurologic disorders, and other chronic conditions. And the health harms of fossil fuel pollution are present even at low everyday levels of exposure. But these illnesses and deaths are preventable, which is why strong evidence-based action is essential. So what does this list of bad things mean in real life? If you have ever sat with a young child struggling to breathe during an asthma attack, looked into those eyes filled with fear, you will have a very different perspective on this subject. It can be life-altering both for the child and the parent, and that is only one of the diseases clearly associated with combustion of oil and gasoline. And who is most likely to suffer these consequences? In general, children, the elderly, people with pre-existing chronic illnesses, but especially those who live near the sources of this pollution, the poor and people of color, reflecting a combination of environmental, social, and physiological inequities that place greater health burdens on already at-risk groups. We must also remember greenhouse gases, primarily CO2, and their contribution to the worsening climate crisis. The worldwide health consequences of climate chaos include an even longer list of diseases, plus droughts, heat emergencies, desertification, floods, sea level rise. All these lead to terrible human suffering, destabilize societies, and lead to mass migration, destabilizing other societies and triggering wars. This is very serious stuff, but we are just not taking it seriously, and that is scary. So how does this relate to the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act? According to the Maryland Department of Transportation, on-road transportation is the single largest greenhouse gas generator in Maryland. The TCA requires that MDOT offset greenhouse gas emissions from significant highway expansion projects by providing clean transportation alternatives. Those alternatives can include public transit, bicycle infrastructure, and walking infrastructure. A vibrant public transit system removes cars from the road, and those cars do not contribute to all the scary things I described above. Making it safe to walk and cycle enables citizens to run short errands without a car and encourages exercise. And it's hardly necessary to explain why that is good for public health. Not only is highway expansion bad for our health, it also does not solve congestion. More miles of highway just bring more traffic. That's called induced demand, which is a real thing. We just cannot go on living and expanding the way we are now. The costs of inaction are measured in illness, lives lost, and mounting healthcare burdens. The benefits of a transition are measured in healthy communities and a safer future for our children and grandchildren. Support the TCA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you so much for calling attention to how this really is very life or death for so many of our communities here in this state, and how important it is to do something about it when we can. And that's exactly why we need this bill. We are going to go next to Maggie Ostall. So Maggie, what are the impacts of climate change that we are seeing now in Maryland, and how can I'm so sorry. And how is sustainable transportation important to addressing that?
Thank you. First of all, I also just want to take a moment to echo thanks for the champions of this legislation, the TCA and the Maryland General Assembly, and thank you to all. I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation. I will say from the get-go that I am not an expert in the details of transportation policy, but at the National Aquarium, we our mission is to connect people with nature to inspire compassion and care of our ocean planet. And so, I like to think that maybe I'm here to help bring a little bit of that ocean voice and why that matters for better transit as a climate solution. I think uh, we've heard the scale of the issue, right? I do think it is really important to acknowledge the scale of what we're up against. This is big. It affects everything. So for for everyone here, I'm sure this is a review, but at its basics, as we're burning fossil fuels, echoing some of what has been said, as we burn fossil fuels, we're adding excessive carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. That's trapping heat. It's like a blanket. It's heat trapping blanket. It's increasing global temperatures. In the words of one of my favorite climate scientists, Dr. Hayhoe, we're giving the planet a fever. We're causing our ocean planet to have a fever, and all of us, all people, are experiencing climate impacts everywhere in many ways. Those impacts, we've heard some of them, but to reiterate a few others, just a few, we're seeing more frequent and intense extreme weather events. That's happening here in Maryland. We're experiencing rising sea levels. That's related to more flooding events. For those that I learned a few years ago, Maryland is also geographically, we are in an area of the North American plate that is sinking. So the landmass is sinking while the sea level is rising. So that's fun. And the ocean, our ocean planet, the ocean has absorbed about 90% of all the excess carbon dioxide already. So the ocean has really helped us quite a bit so far. It's continuing to help us to live with the fossil fuel pollution that we have in our atmosphere, but it has altered and it is altering the chemistry of the seawater. So that's the chemistry of 70% of the surface of our planet. And what that's doing is effectively we're making the ocean a little bit more acidic. So other impacts of climate change mean that in places that are estuaries, like the Chesapeake Bay, the largest estuary in North America, the water is getting more acidic in the ocean and in nearshore and coastal areas, which that in turn is making it more difficult for animals such as oysters to grow their shells and reproduce properly. So for people that are fans of shellfish and all the people's livelihoods that rely on oysters, which is a lot, especially in the Chesapeake Bay, and all the fans of people who like to consume oysters as a sustainable seafood choice, that's being impacted. We know that there are 20% more days that are over 90 degrees over the past decade. That's just a lot of heat. Heat makes people more irritable. It contributes obviously to heat-related illness. There's just tons and tons of impacts. I'm not going to go on and on and on. We know these things. I do think it is really important to call out the fact that climate impacts are disproportionately experienced in communities of color and by people who live in low-income areas. And we need to make sure that we're keeping that in mind, and that is a part of the policies that we are moving forward. Another reason why this policy is really important. And I think just to sum up, we know the scale of the challenge we're up against. We know the extent of the problem, the fact that it's affecting all of us and all of our lives. And we need to not only mitigate it by lowering emissions, we need to adapt to what we're already experiencing, building more climate resiliency, and we need to keep talking about climate. We know that a majority of Americans support climate solutions and support governmental policy that advances climate solutions, but not enough people talk about climate. So I'm really excited to be here as part of this climate conversation that is focused on a solution. We know that transportation is a major share of the emissions in Maryland. And so we need to lower those emissions and adapt to the impacts that those emissions are already causing and be able to sustainably get around in this warming world, which is possible, and this bill will help. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Maggie. It's amazing to me how, something like just transportation can impact our oceans, our, our weather patterns, everything, it's all so interconnected, and we really need to get this passed to help mitigate some of those really, really terrifying things that we have coming our way. We are now going to take it from the ocean to rural Maryland and turn it over to Dr. William Reed. So Dr. Reed, how can clean transportation choices be incorporated in Frederick, Maryland, and in other rural areas around the state?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for asking me to participate in this town hall. I'd like to also thank all involved in their advocacy for this bill. It's very important. So clean transportation is not just for cities. Rural residents want better options. A Gallus research and media poll demonstrated that 83% of rural Maryland voters support more investment in transit, walking, biking. Local and state officials can build clean transportation options into rural communities by expanding rural transit and commuter bus connections by increasing MARC train service, for instance, the Brunswick line here in Frederick, expand commuter bus routes to job centers, add small-scale circulator buses that link towns to major corridors, support online microtransit, which works well in low-density areas. These services reduce long car commutes and provide options for residents who do not drive. Number two, build safe infrastructure for walking and biking. Rural areas have higher roadway fatality rates, yet often lack shoulders, sidewalks, and safe crossings. Improvements would include paved shoulders for bikes and pedestrians, multi-use rural trail networks, safe crossing near schools, workplaces, and town centers. These upgrades make roads safer for everyone. Number three, strengthen paratransit and Americans with disability accessibility. Rural Maryland has higher percentage of residents with disabilities. Clean transportation must include expansion of paratransit services and ADA accessible bus stops, crossing, and sidewalks. These options ensure mobility for people who cannot drive. Protect farmland and main streets. Highway expansion cuts into farmland, diverts traffic away from historic downtowns, and weakens rural small businesses. Investing in transit, rail, and rural mobility hubs helps towns stay vibrant and keeps economic activity local. Number five, pair clean transportation with smart growth. Cluster housing, jobs, medical services, and schools in walkable town centers so that people don't have to drive long distances. This approach reduces car emissions, lowers infrastructure costs, and strengthens rural main streets. Frederick County's Monocacy MARC train station transit-oriented development area is a model for how rail access and walkable design can coexist even in areas with rural characteristics. Finally, clean transportation in rural Maryland is both feasible and popular. It means safer roads, stronger main streets, more mobility for seniors and people with disabilities, less farmland loss, and transportation choices which match what rural residents say they want.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. It's the transportation can really be for lack of a, no pun intended, can really be a vehicle for driving economic growth in our rural communities. And TCA is, I think, really going to bring these benefits not just to Baltimore City and Montgomery County, but to our communities across the state. Thank you for being here. We are now going to go to Quentin Batts. So Quentin, can you share some more information about how bike infrastructure is a key part of our clean transportation network and the benefits for projects like the Greenway Trails Network?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for having me, and thank you for all of the support and work everyone has put in on the TCA over the years. For Baltimore, one of our biggest issues is vehicular traffic, heat index, and a lack of a working transit network, which can also help with VRU. But with our multimodal network, That's where Baltimore can thrive from this bill. We need upgraded sidewalks, upgraded crosswalks, and we need ADA compliance. But the biggest thing is our transit system because most of Baltimore do not have cars and they rely on a transit system that is unreliable. And we just need more economic growth to actually see a change. And a bill like this can actually give us the legs that we need to get this train moving. And this bill has really sparked some interest with our local coalition. Last year, they went and spoke with all of their local electeds and actually went up to legislation when the bill was going through the House. And they plan to do that again this year. So I want y'all to know that there is a coalition behind y'all in Baltimore that sees this work as an important value to the city, but also as a value part of our Green Network plan. Baltimore City has a vision to become a green city, but also a city that serves all equity through transit.
Thank you so much, Quentin. I am now going to open this up to the whole panel to ask this question. So what is your vision? Actually, Quentin, thank you for the perfect bridge to this question. What is your vision for how Marylanders can have more affordable and sustainable transportation options for people to get around? And what would you like to see happen in your own community? So open to the whole panel.
Frequent buses that run on schedule reliably. Currently, there's an app you can use to track some of the buses. Not all of them have transponders, which is one of the problems. Before, they used to type in a number for the bus stop you're at, and it would tell you when the next one's coming, and you could follow. It'd be 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then not infrequently, I got to 0 and there was no bus, and the message would say "nah, nah, 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 nah," literally. So frequent buses that run on, and they don't have to be such big buses either. I don't know the capital stuff behind that, but that's what I would put first.
A meaningful vision for Maryland's transportation future starts with one core idea. Every resident, urban, suburban, and rural, should have affordable, safe, and sustainable choices for getting around. Right now, transportation is Maryland's #1 source of climate pollution and the second largest household expense. We can change that by shifting the system built almost entirely around highways to one which actually serves people. First, Maryland needs more reliable, frequent public transit, such as expanded MARC train service, better commuter bus routes, and on-demand microtransit that works well in rural areas. These options cut commuter costs, reduce greenhouse gas emissions while giving people real alternatives to long drives. Secondly, we need safe infrastructure for walking and biking, such as sidewalks, shoulders, trails, and protected lanes. Rural communities experience, as I said before, experience higher fatality rates, and these investments directly improve safety while creating affordable ways to reach jobs, schools, and other services. Thirdly, Maryland must strengthen the paratransit and ADA accessible facilities, particularly in rural areas where most residents with disabilities rely on these services. A genuinely sustainable vision also protects what makes our communities unique. Instead of letting highways expand, pave over farmland, and drain life away from rural main streets, we need to focus on smart growth development, walkable, mixed-use town centers anchored by transit. Frederick County work around Monocacy MARC Station shows how rail access, housing, and safe streets come together to reduce traffic and support local businesses. In my community, I would like to see more frequent MARC train services, safer walkable routes between neighborhoods and schools, especially along the Golden Mile, which is also referred to as Route 40, where most of our Alice population lives. A network of trails that connects residents to main streets and jobs. I want to see people such as seniors, workers, students, and people with disabilities to have mobility options that don't require owning a car or sitting in traffic. and I want a transportation system that strengthens our economy instead of fracturing it. This is a future that Maryland can build, one that is cleaner, more affordable, and more equitable for everyone.
I would definitely like to jump in. Dr. William, you hit it right on the head. That's exactly what we need. Speaking of transit equity, in Baltimore, believe it or not, our trails is probably one of the most used transit options other than the bus network. The Inner Harbor Trail for general is used for basic day-to-day travel, folks trying to get to work, but our trail system supports our last mile connection destinations. That's most travelers' issue in Baltimore, is that last mile, having to walk too far. And having equitable transit options available and always running is my everlasting goal of what a beautiful Maryland can look like, connected through transit. I would love to see the light rail happen to Baltimore. We need the red line. Projects like that is essential for state growth and transit growth. But what I want to see in my own community is I would really love to see a updated subway system. I live in Middle East Baltimore. I'm right beside Johns Hopkins Hospital. If some of you aren't familiar with Baltimore, and I'm the first stop or the last stop, depending on where you catch the subway. And I would definitely like that to be my preferred mode of transit all the time.
Thank you all. Thank you
I
all.
will-
Maggie, did you
sorry.
have a point? Go ahead. No, please.
I would
go
just
ahead.
I would just love to chime in, agreeing with all of these experts. I think that we know. I looked up a couple things. We know that at the National Aquarium, about a third of our staff and volunteers use modes of transport that are not passenger vehicle. But I know for a fact that many of us would like to do more of that. The options are just either not affordable or not existent or both. We also know that less than 10%, the number is lower for our guests, less than 10% of guests to the National Aquarium are coming by transit or rideshare. We'd like to see that number get higher, which means that we need to have more options. They need to be affordable, they need to be equitable, they need to be available, they need to be reliable. And, I think this bill will help move those possibilities forward. Personally, I would like to see more ferries and bigger and more use of water taxis, because commuting and for tourists and visitors to Maryland for sure, but also for regular everyday passengers. Have passenger ferries. There are electric ferries now. There are non fossil fuel generated water vehicles that can move people around short distance, longer distances, and commuting by ferry is just lovely. So that's my dream personally.
I would love to be on a ferry right now. That sounds incredible. So thank you all. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here. I think as we've heard tonight, there are so many different, modes, vehicles, types of transportation that play into this overall picture. But I think that what we really need to reground in is, people first. People planning for people, not planning for those cars. So I think this is just a wonderful roundup of all the different aspects that go into our transportation system here. So thank you all so much for joining us. And we are now going to hear from our lovely, lovely Senate sponsor, Senator Shelley Heddleman. So Senator, here, let's wait till it's the two of us. Here we go. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator Heddleman. So brief introduction. Senator Heddleman is the lead sponsor of the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act in the Senate, and she represents District 11 in Baltimore County. She serves as chair of the Senate Rules Committee and is a member of the Budget and Taxation Committee. Senator Heddleman is a strong proponent of public transit and introduced legislation signed into law in 2023 that protects MTA transit riders from mandatory fare increases. She has also been the lead sponsor of the Fair Share Act, which would generate much needed funding for action on climate change, public transit, and education. Senator Hedelman has a 98% lifetime score on environmental issues from the League of Conservation Voters, and we are very glad to have her with us here today, and I will turn it over.
Thank you so much, Casey. It's great to see everybody. Can't believe there are almost 90 people on this rally, which is amazing on this very, very dark, cold night at 8 o'clock when you could be doing so many other things. So that just shows your commitment and why, and that this issue is so important to so many people. So we need to take all of your energy. I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier, but I was actually out in Owings Mills meeting with young people and the PTSA out at Owings Mills High School. So talking to them about scholarships and going to college, and we need them to be activists and environmentalists as well. So I'm sorry I missed the earlier pipe, but I'm really happy to be here with you this evening. And I know my colleague, I'm guessing you've already shared the video from Delegate Mark Edelson. Great. So he's been a wonderful colleague and partner in this, as has the League of Women Voters, as has the Sierra Club, as has the League of Conservation Voters, and so many others of you who are, I know, on here. I haven't had a chance to scroll through everybody yet, but we need your help. We need your help this session. We need your help in particular in the Senate. We know that the Transportation Climate Alignment Act has passed the House 2 years in a row. And we need to do some work in the Senate, and we need each and every one of you to especially look at my wonderful colleagues on the Budget and Taxation Committee, see if you live in their district, and please reach out to them and tell them why this bill is so important. We are very, and I say this more and more every day, very, very fortunate to live in the state of Maryland, right? Especially in this time and where we are in history. We have a governor and who put out an executive order, and he, a couple of years, January 24, and he said he wanted each of his agencies to talk about how they were going to put together a plan for how they were going to help our state meet certain goals. And he put that in writing for the Maryland Department of Transportation as well. And I'm just going to read what their charge is: to develop and implement a process for evaluating and reducing greenhouse gas emissions attributable to transportation projects through the Consolidated Transportation Plan, and to look at investing in new infrastructure programs and to reduce vehicle miles traveled and enhance transportation choices in Maryland. And that's really what this bill is about. This bill is about taking a long-term look at our transportation program, our investments in highways, et cetera, looking at what those kinds of projects, the impacts that they have on greenhouse gases, and saying, nope, for projects going for new projects, nope, we got to figure out a better, cleaner, healthier, greener way of doing this. And there are so many things that we can do to mitigate the effects of those kinds of projects. And so we need to look at some of those funds and to look at bike trails, to look at walking, to look at public transit, to look at what it is that we can do to offset what those other plans are. So did you know that, transportation is the second largest expense for people. In other states where they have put this bill into action, they've actually created a myriad of other transportation options for people that are cleaner, are greener, and have the added benefit of saving money, which is really amazing, like in Colorado and in Minnesota. And we want to do that here. So how is it that you can help? You can get to know what the bill does. You can look at who it is in the Budget and Tax Committee on the Senate side, and honestly, all of your members, because we hope once it gets out of that committee then everybody will have an opportunity to consider it on the Senate floor. And so we'll need support there too. And on the House side, the Appropriations Committee. And even though they have passed it, it has passed on the floor. We don't want to take anything for granted. And so we need you to get involved there too. So creating these investments in public transit and bike and pedestrian infrastructure really will be a wonderful thing for all of us to help reduce greenhouse gases, to help our state meet our climate goals, our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and to provide more choices, more affordable choices for our citizens. So it creates jobs, it makes us all healthier, increases safety, etc. So again, I thank you guys for being here. I hope that we will get some early consideration during session. I actually just dropped the bill today. Today at 5 o'clock was the filing deadline for bills to be pre-filed. So when the website makes its conversion to 2026 new bills, which should be in a couple of weeks, you will be able to see it there and help us. So thank you to everybody again, the Sierra Club, League of Women Voters. I know Lindsay and Casey have been there. We've worked in partnership with MDOT, and we hope to continue that partnership with them and the administration to get this across the finish line this year. Third time's the charm. So I'm very excited to work with Delegate Edelson and work with all of you to make it happen this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Hedelman, and thank you for all of your leadership on this bill, on transportation, as a bigger picture. And we are just so grateful to have you, in this fight with us as we go into 2026.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it might be, is it time for trivia round 2? I think it is trivia round 2. So we are gonna kick it off. We have 2 questions in round 2. What decade was the last expansion of the Baltimore transit system in? Was it in the early 70s, the mid 80s, late 90s, or the late 2000s? So again, what decade was the last expansion of the Baltimore transit system? You're gonna give us perfect. Okay, so the answer is the late 90s, which means it's been over 2 decades since the last expansion of the Baltimore transit system. Several years past due. So that's part of why we're here. We need to get this done. We need to improve our systems. Perfect. All right, question number 2 is, what is the highest transportation priority that the Charles County Commissioners requested state funding for? Is it a US 301 expansion, the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Project, the Western Bypass of Waldorf, or the Maryland 5 Great Mills Road expansion? So again, what was the highest transportation priority that the Charles County Commissioners requested state funding for? Okay, so answer for number 2 is the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Project is the top requested project for state funding in Charles County. So we are now going to turn it over to, if I can find my correct notes, Michi Daniels, who is a transit rider that lives in Northwest Baltimore and works as a letter carrier in Park Heights. So Michi, thanks for joining us and take it away.
Hi, thank you for hosting this lovely gathering. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of transit riders in the city. And so I want to start off with a recent story, I guess, I've had riding the MTA. And if you've rode the MTA with any regularity, then you probably have a couple of your own stories that I'm sure you love to tell your friends every time you take the bus. But recently, I, as a letter carrier, often will only have Sundays off. So I have to, everyone has things they have to do around the house, errands. I have to go to my pharmacy in this example, which is on the other side of the city. It's in Baltimore County, but it's transit accessible. It's on the 77 and it's near the blue and the purple. And so I'm fortunate enough to live on the subway. So I took the subway downtown to transfer to a bus to get out there. And the first one I tried was the blue, and the schedule, it showed 0 minutes, -1, -2, -3, no bus. What's the deal there? And moving on. So I'm kind of frantically thinking, I'm like, what do I do next? I go down 2 blocks south to not Lombard Street, to Fayette Street to catch the purple, and 0 minutes, -1 minute, -2 minutes, -3 minutes, no bus. And so I'm running out of options here. I like to say that the MTA gives you lots of options, just none of them are good. So the third option was the 163, which also did not show up. And so I just went home, and I had to make one of my friends get my prescriptions while I was at work the next day, because I was just incapable of going to the pharmacy before it closed to get the prescriptions I need. And this is as someone who lives on our subway, which is the most effective and useful form of transit we have in Baltimore. And even though I have access to the best transit in the city, I'm still constantly frustrated, and I can't get places I need to go when I need to go there. I can't get to work on time if I need to. I have to leave an hour early, and my workplace is not that far. I mean, I could bike there in maybe 20, 30 minutes at most. And of course, we don't have that option in the city. If you want to get somewhere safely, biking is rarely an option. And so you're forced to deal with the MTA. And this has been a consistent problem if you're trying to get anywhere in the city, no matter who you are. If you can't afford to have a car or don't feel like taking on the expense of having a vehicle, because it is very expensive, especially in Maryland, which is why you see all those people with Virginia plates running around the city, try to get a loophole. But the fact that they have to do that is for more reasons than just there's a loophole in place that they can take advantage of. It's that they have to take advantage of the loophole, because otherwise car ownership would be too expensive and they wouldn't be able to get to work on time to make money to afford to live and to own that car. And that was one story, but I have a million other stories like that, all the way back to my youth, trying to get to school on time, trying to get to my first job on time. Actually, my first job was in a place where I couldn't get there via transit. I had to figure something else out. The opportunities I was given were limited by just the fact that I was not able to get to the places in which I would be able to be hired at. And so I had to compromise and find another job, maybe not as high quality, but it's on the bus, so it's good enough. And so just right there is an example of how I could have had maybe a better job, maybe a better paying job, maybe a better opportunity. Maybe I would have been able to go on to a better school if there was transit options that actually allowed me to do that. But instead, I'm forced to ride our MTA, which constantly will ghost you. And even when it isn't ghosting you, the schedules are tough to work around. We have a couple frequent buses, but unless you're on the subway, you're not really getting anywhere in any useful amount of time. You've got to leave an hour early, even if it's down the street.
Michi, thank you so much for sharing your experience with riding transit in Baltimore. I think that really highlights for us that, you know, it's not only whether it exists and whether it's there, but it's whether it's reliable. It's how is it being operated? How is it being maintained? And is it, you know, being operated in a way that people can utilize it to get to the opportunities that they need to get to. So thank you so much for joining us, Michi. It was wonderful to meet you and wonderful to have you with us today. So I think that is the end of our speaker lineup for tonight, but I think I want to first of all thank all of our speakers for joining us. Tonight for me really highlighted how transportation is, you know, it's not just point A to point B, where you're coming from and where you're going. It's our health, it's our job opportunities, it's economic growth, it's environmental justice. I mean, this is touching really and truly every single aspect of our lives as Marylanders. And this bill, the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act, is really, it's really a powerful tool and an incredible opportunity for us to harness some of the benefits and the potential benefits that you've heard our speakers talk about tonight. So I do want to talk a little bit more about how to get involved with the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act campaign. How to get involved. So if you would like us to, number one, if you would like to be a part of sharing your personal transit story, your personal experience in video format, we're putting together some video projects. So if you are interested in participating in that, if you wouldn't mind either dropping your name in the chat for us, your email / name in the chat for us, or just simply raising your hand with the React feature on the bottom bar on your Zoom screen. So there will also be, I believe, an opportunity to do so in the follow-up. Perfect, awesome, thank you, Alex. And also, if you change your mind, if you want to get involved later, please feel free to reach out to any of us directly. I'm going to throw my email in the chat as well. And then also, it's okay if you're camera shy, but if you would like to just kind of generally join TCA, the campaign to support this movement, help us get this across the finish line as we go into the General Assembly session. Same thing, please either drop your name in the chat, direct message us, send me an email at the email I just dropped, or raise your hand using the React feature on the bottom bar on Zoom, and we will capture your name. Perfect. Fabulous. Perfect. Love it. Awesome. Well, I think that about wraps us up for this evening. So we want to thank all of you for joining us tonight on your Thursday evening. As it gets dark, we are really looking forward to getting this over the finish line this year. Thank you so much to Senator Hettleman, our phenomenal Senate sponsor, and to Delegate Edelson, our phenomenal House sponsor who sent us the video earlier. And thank you again to all of you for showing up, for staying engaged in this movement. And yeah, I just can't wait to keep this going.
Thank you, Casey, for running a tight ship and keeping us on schedule.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us. And
great job, everybody. Great job.
On time. 2
you.
minutes early, actually. We're looking pretty good on time.
Yeah, 2 minutes time back.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.